Hello, welcome in on this Monday night. Today we have the controversial topic of the past 30 hours or so on the docket. How much fault does Kyle Shanahan carry for Trey Lance's injury? You probably will not be shocked to hear me say that the answer has a lot of gray area. It's really nuanced. And I know that there's a bunch of talking heads on TV yelling back and forth at each other. Oh, it's all Kyle's fault. No, there's no fault at all in the head coach. It's a violent sport. Guys get hurt. And I don't think the answer is at either of those two extremes. I actually think that it sets up a really interesting discussion of philosophy, of risk management, and of quarterback development. And obviously, the 49ers now have to put that on hiatus for Trey Lance for at least the next several months. By the way, he did undergo successful surgery on a broken fibula and some damaged ligaments in the ankle today at Stanford Hospital. So the rehab process will begin in earnest here in the next couple of days as soon as Lance is fully recovered from that surgery. So best wishes to him, obviously, because it was a gruesome injury and it is one that's going to keep him out here for the rest of the 2022 season. But we're not talking about that season right now. We're talking about what happened prior to this injury, leading up to it, to maybe cause it. Does Shanahan deserve blame? What's the deal here? Who's right in this article of people yelling at each other on TV and on the internet? First things first, this has to be established. This is a ground rule with which we're operating right here. Football is a violent sport and injuries happen. I see way too much of the Madden mentality, the video game mentality today, where people think that they could just simply turn injuries off. So then they, by extension, believe that a coach can just turn injuries off, that he could play God mode, and that any injury that happens, fire the training staff, fire the coach, do whatever, somebody has to be fired because they think that every single incident of bad luck for a team is somehow connected to something that the team can control, somebody's job performance. And that's just not the case. Football is going to be a violent sport. Injuries are going to happen. Now, the question is, does this, starkly apply to this Trey Lance situation, or did the 49ers do something that put Trey Lance into harm's way that was unnecessary? Because, again, if injuries are going to happen regardless, then you have to debate whether or not the injury happened or could have happened because of a decision that put the player in a more susceptible position to it. Shanahan, for his part, maintains, and he's maintained here over the last 24 hours, he's had 2 media appearances. The first one was the post-game press conference, and on Monday afternoon, he had a conference call. Shanahan maintains that quarterback runs are a common part of the sport of football, and he is right. It's, they ran read option. And by the way, right here, I had to put this one up here. If you must unload on Kyle Shanahan right now, please stop calling zone reads QB power. QB power is not the play that Trey Lance got hurt on. It was a zone read. And I think that's, part of his annoyance. Kyle Shanahan's annoyance is that a lot of people choosing to criticize him are broadcasting that they don't have any idea of what they're talking about, because they're not emphasizing that Trey Lance had an option to hand off on the play in question. It might have been the right decision to keep that particular handoff. I don't know what the exact coaching point on it was, but if you're going to criticize, at least call the play right. And it was a zone read. It was not quarterback power. They weren't sitting back there with one option running quarterback power. Anyway, Shanahan maintains the QB runs are a common part of the sport. And we talk about read option. That has become a common part of the sport. Jimmy Garoppolo even ran it. That was controversial as well. But he's not a mobile quarterback per se, right? And he ran it toward the end of the game near the goal line. So it's about playing 11-on-11 football. It's about making the defense account for the quarterback's legs. Shanahan is right about this. Running Trey Lance just once, or however many times, we're going to discuss frequency in a little bit, but actually running Trey Lance is nothing out of the ordinary. All teams are doing it with their quarterback. The issue at play here is the issue of regularity. And this is where I think that some of the blame does start to shift onto Kyle Shanahan here. The issue of regularity is that Trey Lance has run 13 times per game in his limited action and his limited starting time. He's started 4 games now against Arizona in 2021, against Houston in 2021, and then obviously against Chicago, and then against the Seattle Seahawks in week 2. That Arizona start, his first career start, that was 16 runs and a knee injury. Perhaps that should have been a warning to the 49ers. 16 runs is probably too much. You can't be exposing your quarterback that many times out there. But they had a reason why they ran 16 times, because Trey Lance had a chipped finger and they couldn't throw that many times. More on that in a little bit. Still, it was 16 runs. Still, they averaged 13 runs, over 13 runs per start for Trey Lance. And, when we talk about regularity, there's a reason why running backs have a higher injury rate than quarterbacks. And it's because running backs run with much more frequency across the board than quarterbacks. They take more contact. Again, it's a matter of risk. If, you speed any number of times on a highway, the more times you speed, the more likely it is that you'll get caught, right? So if you run, all these hits are like minor car collisions in the NFL. These guys are so big, fast, and strong. So if you run into more of these collisions, you're going to have more of a likelihood that you're going to get injured. So there's a reason why running backs get hurt all the time. The 49ers are really dealing with that again. They deal with it on an annual basis, but now Ty Davis-Price has a high ankle sprain. He'll probably be headed to IR to join Elijah Mitchell, and the 49ers have to keep on replenishing that position. Well, if Trey Lance is running 13 times per game, he's running as much as the 49ers lead backs, right? He's absorbing the same workload. Now, Shanahan has talked about knowing how to take contact, knowing how to split defenders. I'm sorry, at a certain point, no matter what you do on the chaotic football field, you're going to take heavy contact. And Trey Lance has been taking heavy contact. He's been taking it multiple times per game. So while Shanahan maintains that, quarterbacks do run, quarterbacks haven't run with Trey Lance's regularity before this injury all too often. Shanahan cited Josh Allen, but Josh Allen wasn't running nearly as often, even early on when he was still an inaccurate passer in 2018 as Trey Lance did early in his career. So this is where I start to see usage, and that's determined by the coaching staff. This is where I start to see that as a potential issue. But even behind usage, there is a lot of nuance to discuss. You can't just sit there and say, fire Kyle Shanahan because he decided to run Trey Lance a lot. We have to sit there and examine what are the reasons. Why did Kyle Shanahan run Trey Lance a lot? And this is the nuanced truth. The 49ers started Trey Lance this year as, they felt compelled to do based on how much they invested in him draft capital wise, but they started Trey Lance on a competitive roster. Josh Allen started for a Bills team that wasn't necessarily competitive, at least not for a Super Bowl in 2018 when he was a rookie. Very often you see top 5 draft pick quarterbacks. Trey Lance went number 3. Go to bad teams. Why do they go to bad teams? Well, because if you have a top 5 draft pick, you weren't very good the year before. The 49ers were exceptional because they went to the Super Bowl in 2019. They had the COVID year in 2020. That gave them a high-ish draft pick in the first round, but then they traded up even further to get Trey Lance. So they had a really good roster considering the fact that they were picking at number 3. So Trey Lance was thrown into a competitive roster. That's really, really important to emphasize. And because of that, the 49ers were in a situation where they had to satisfy multiple interests. They had to walk a tightrope. The multiple interests at hand were the 49ers and the competitive roster trying to make a Super Bowl, trying to beat teams in front of them, and developing Trey Lance. Now, the general rule of mobile quarterback development is that you learn how to throw from the pocket so that you can protect yourself from excessive running. Obviously, there was excessive running going on 13 times a game. But the nuanced truth is that the reason that there was excessive running going on is because Trey Lance wasn't fully developed yet from the pocket. So normally on a bad team, if you get drafted in the top 5, you can make your mistakes from the pocket. You could sit back there. You could throw interceptions. And by the way, you could also get hurt from the pocket. If you don't know where the pass rush is coming from, you can get drilled. Shanahan made that point too. That's also a risk to the job. So again, there's a lot of gray area here. But in general, I think that you're a little bit safer if you're focusing on getting the ball out in time in the pocket than if you're running into bigger linebackers like Trey Lance did the other day against the Seattle Seahawks. But if you're not adept from the pocket, if that's still something that you're learning on the fly, there will be mistakes. Look at Trevor Lawrence for the Jacksonville Jaguars last season. He made a lot of mistakes, threw a lot of picks, wasn't very good. A bad team can deal with those mistakes being made in real time. A good team can't do that, right? The 49ers have a good roster. You can't squander a championship roster window. So if you do make the move to go and draft Trey Lance, you're going to have to find a way, obviously, to play him for the capital reasons that you sacrificed, right? You got to give him a chance to develop into the player that you want him to be. But you have to find a way for him to do that within the parameters of he can't just screw up this golden chance for this really good roster. So the 49ers made a deal. They didn't shake hands with anybody, but they made a deal in their heads. They made a deal as far as usage went. They knew that more contact for Trey Lance was part of their 2022 plan. Trey Lance needed to get more efficient between point A, which was before the injury, and point B, which was toward the end of the season. Because if he got more efficient, he would end up being an asset and a complement to the 49ers Super Bowl push. But they needed to play him so that he would get there. But because he wasn't at the level of passing refinement that they needed him to be in weeks 1 and week 2, more rushing of the football from Trey Lance was used to fill the gap so they wouldn't expose the roster to too many negative plays. The 49ers aren't idiots. Kyle Shanahan is not an idiot. He knows deep down, he might not admit it right now, and I'm not involved in this for coaches to go apologize to the media and the fans. I mean, I'm just here to analyze the sport, analyze what Kyle Shanahan says. And this is nothing personal, right? This is, a lot of people take it personally. A lot of people, watch on YouTube and then they're like, I want Shanahan to apologize. I want him to be fired. I mean, who cares? Let's see why Shanahan's doing what he's doing. Let's figure out what he was thinking. And then we could see if he's going to do it again or if he's not going to do it again. But at the end of the day, an apology at a press conference or whatever, or, complete acknowledgement of something at a press conference is not going to change reality. And the reality is that Trey Lance is done for the season. So I can tell you just from inference, just from studying this situation, just from studying the tactics here, also from Shanahan's tonality, I think that, and just the fact that Shanahan's a smart guy, he knows that exposing your quarterback to more hits is going to put him inherently in more danger of injury. But the 49ers signed up for this. This was a deal that they made because they were playing a balancing act. They were taking a big swing. They were trying to have their cake and eat it too. And you know what? This is where we hit the gold mine of the answer. And that's this right here. Every part of this QB process, going back to the 49ers trading up to number 3 to draft Trey Lance in 2021, has been a big swing. They have pushed their chips into the middle of the table at every single juncture of this. Just think of it. Trading up all this capital to move up to number 3, then deciding to keep Jimmy Garoppolo with Trey Lance on the roster throughout the 2021 season. They were trying to have the best of both tracks, right? They wanted the short-term track. They wanted Trey to learn behind him before he took the field on the long-term track. And then even later, it might have been by accident this year, but the 49ers were able to flip places. Lance became QB1, Garoppolo became QB2, but they still had both of them. And it was still a big swing in many regards, right? They had to believe in their locker room to have both of these guys on the roster without any problems. And, most of these big swings, every single one really the 49ers took was working out, right? In 2021, it worked out to keep Garoppolo. They went on a hell of a run. They're just short of the Super Bowl. A lot of fans have great memories from that run. I mean, they might have won the Super Bowl had it not been for a high ankle sprain to Trent Williams and 2 arm injuries to Jimmy Garoppolo. They were close enough to be really, really serious about knocking on the door of that title. Didn't happen, right? And then moving into the start of this season, keeping both Jimmy and Trey, it seemed like that would work out too, based on how receptive the locker room was and the season started. And, it seemed there was a lot of support and good vibes in the locker room there. But they kept on taking big swing after big swing after big swing. And the most recent big swing was, okay, how do we bridge this gap of Trey Lance needing time to develop as a passer? He needs game reps to do it now. But we don't want to hurt the roster. We want to optimize the chances for winning on a week-out, week basis. Well, we're going to do it by playing to what's his strongest suit right now. We're going to run him. And they decided to run him a lot. And up until now, it was 13 times per game. And guess what happens with big swings? Some of them are going to backfire. And this big swing backfired. So in a high stakes game, chips constantly pushed to the middle of the table, the 49ers, this was just running Trey Lance a lot was part of the risk. They were willing to put it all on the line to go draft him. They're willing to pull a lot of it on the line by running him so much. That's the way that I see this. And in this case, it didn't pay off for them. They're trying to have their cake and eat it too. And they had succeeded in many ways. 2021, there was success in the 49ers having their cake and eating it too, keeping Garoppolo, competing deep into the NFC playoffs, having Trey Lance learn under him, getting ready to start in 22. It worked that year, but it's not always going to work. And I don't think that you can count this is working right now, right, when Trey Lance got hurt. But at the end of the day, you go back to this truth as well. The one at the very start, football's a violent sport. There's an alternate universe in which the 49ers got away with it, in which Trey Lance didn't get hurt because he avoided that injury risk. He still ran a bunch of times. He still runs a bunch of times in the next few weeks. He develops as a passer, and the 49ers enter the playoffs, and he torches everybody with his arm because he developed so well over the 2022 season, and everybody goes home happy. Nobody's questioning Kyle Shanahan. Now, I will say that I did question Kyle Shanahan before the injury. The timing was weird because I sent out a tweet 5 minutes before the injury, the carry before Trey Lance got hurt. And I said, this is absolutely fair to question because the injury risk is going up here for Trey Lance. He's taking too many big hits. He is running in between the tackles, even if it is a zone read. That was an interior tackle run. So to me, there was a little alarm bell going off in my head. And I was like, the 49ers, I see why they're doing this because Shanahan, again, has to follow the nuanced truth. He has to serve the roster. He has to serve multiple interests. This is the best chance to win if Trey Lance runs now. But I was like, oh boy, there's a lot invested in Trey Lance. And this is a chance of going south if he runs into the wrong type of contact. And then obviously it did happen. Now, this is why you buy the insurance policy, right? This is why the 49ers have Jimmy Garoppolo. So you have to give Shanahan credit for that, although it did fall into their laps, but you still give the decision makers credit because they did execute that deal when it did come available to them. But now they're on the insurance policy. You don't take out insurance policies wanting to have to use them, but now they're on it. And, this is going to open up a whole other can of worms, a whole other segment of this discussion. Well, aren't the 49ers better now? Well, yeah, maybe in the now they're better. And I'm going to talk about this more tomorrow. I have a big article coming out tomorrow. 49ers are more efficient offensively at this moment right now with Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance, but they had a long-term plan going. Again, they're trying to have their cake and eat it too. They wanted Trey Lance to improve over the course of the season, to develop over the course of the season, so they could raise the ceiling above the Jimmy Garoppolo level at the end of it. And obviously, that's no longer going to happen. So now they're going to have to focus their attention on Garoppolo and see if he could raise his ceiling of play, maybe re-raise it back to 2017 levels. That's the spoiler alert for the article that's coming out tomorrow on Athletic from me. And obviously, we'll talk about it on the video. But this is one thing that's kind of an overarching key to all of this is, and you have to remember this because people always think in terms of what the situation is now, what's Shanahan's thought process now, and they don't realize that it might change. But Shanahan's faith or lack thereof in Trey Lance's passing wasn't meant to be a constant variable, right? Okay, so let me explain. The 49ers obviously didn't have as much faith in Trey Lance's passing abilities right before the injury as they do in Jimmy Garoppolo's passing abilities. That's just logic. 1 + 1 = 2, right? Lance was a rougher passer than he was a runner, so they ran out of the first 15 plays against the Seahawks. They ran 12 times, and they passed 3 times, 3 runs specifically for Trey Lance. Because their faith in him as a passer hadn't yet fully been established, it is my belief that, and I think it's supported by a lot of anecdotal evidence and a lot of just, experience watching how these things flow. Because of that, it is my belief that they had to run Trey Lance more often. But a lot of people will just stop the thought process there, and they'll be like, "Oh, see, it's because Kyle Shanahan didn't trust Trey Lance, and it's because he doesn't, he made the wrong pick, and this was a bust, and nothing will ever get better, and the 49ers are screwed even if Lance comes back fully healthy." And they'll say all this stuff, but they don't realize that truth, that was the truth entering Sunday, September 18th, that obviously the 49ers trusted Lance's legs more than they trusted his feet. That truth, the 49ers never counted on that to stay constant. They counted on Trey Lance to develop over the course of this 2022 season. And the ultimate goal was to hit a point where Trey's arm became more trusted than his legs. So the faith or lack thereof in Trey Lance's arm was never meant to stay the same. It was meant to improve. It was meant to gradually get better. And as it gradually get better, in theory, the 49ers wouldn't have to run Trey as much, wouldn't have to expose him as much to injury. And then they could usher him into the era of being a good pocket passer. You saw Steve Young make a similar development in his career when he went from scrambler, run first guy, to Bill Walsh teaching him how to deliver from the pocket. Well, the 49ers wanted to do something similar with Trey Lance. And they might still have that opportunity, but it's now put on hiatus because Lance is now hurt. But it's very important to note that this was supposed to be a fluid situation. And I think that, helps kind of make sense of the risk that Kyle Shanahan took, because the 49ers absolutely risked something with running Trey Lance so much. And because of that, I think it's silly to not blame Shanahan at all. But I'm not sitting here saying, oh my God, Kyle Shanahan should be fired for malpractice, because you saw all this that he's talked about. It's so nuanced. There's so many interests to appease in this situation that the 49ers are responsible for appeasing, and it's all operating within the backdrop of the sport of football, which is violent, where injuries do happen. So the truth is never on one of these extremes. It is a complicated situation, and sometimes stuff is not going to go your way. You took a risk. It didn't work out. You have to move on. And thankfully for the 49ers, they do have the insurance plan and Jimmy Garoppolo. So this doesn't hurt as bad in the short term, but it still is a really bad situation for Trey Lance's long-term development, and obviously puts a lot on hiatus. 49ers can't even think about raising the ceiling with Trey Lance this year. Again, the focus will now have to be on Garoppolo, who I wrote about tonight. That article comes out early tomorrow morning, so be sure to check it out on The Athletic. Subscribe to The Athletic. And right now I want to give you guys a 49ers depth chart check-in. So I'm going to make this big up on the screen. Let's take a look at the 49ers depth charts. If you guys want a link to this, I will go ahead and put it in the chat section for you. Hello, everybody. If you're just coming in, welcome in on this beautiful Monday evening. And there you go. That's the spreadsheet. You check it out. All right, so the roster update that I want to give you happens at running back, where Ty Davis-Price has a high ankle sprain. I put him on IR. I'm not sure, 100% sure if that's going to happen, but you can see open running back spot. Maybe they flex up Marlon Mack, or they promote him full-time. Not sure that's going to work. And then at tight end, Tyler Kroft over here moves over to IR. So we'll see if the 49ers bring Fumagalli up or what they do. But they currently have 50 of 53 50-man roster spots, 50 of 53 of their 53-man roster spots filled. They've got a full practice squad. They're probably going to have to bump somebody up like Malik Turner. So we'll see exactly what the 49ers do to make that work. All right, do I wade into the chat section or not? Good time for you guys to smash the like button, smash the sub button. And I'll take a peek at the chat section, but I may not take too many of these questions. I was hoping that, this would settle down a bit, that we'd have a little bit more of a rational conversation about this. And I think we're probably at that spot. Brent has a question. What's your question, Brent? Hurry up. I'm just kidding. I'll drink my water here as I wait for you guys. I don't really follow too much what other beat reporters say. If I'm seeing a question right here, shake my head. I don't have time in the day. I'm producing so much content these days. We got so many in-depth pieces up on The Athletic. I like talking to everybody, connecting here. I got some radio interviews. There's just so much noise out there. I almost feel kind of like the 49ers. They try to tune the noise out. I just try to tune the noise out, and I try to analyze it as best as I can. Somebody asked if I think Kyle ruined Trey like RG3. We don't know Trey's full story yet. I mean, we don't know. I mean, he's just so early in his development process. The problem is that we don't have enough variables to evaluate Trey. So it's tough. And it was a risk that the 49ers took. And I explained why they took it, because Kyle Shanahan was serving multiple interests with the roster. But we need more data points on Trey Lance to know the end of the story, because it doesn't seem like it's finished yet to me. He's still 22 years old. All right. After the game at the presser, this is Brent's question. All right, I promised I'd put this one up. After the game at the presser, how the players who are interviewed decided by the journalist, media manager, NFL, it seems relevant to the game. 49ers PR staff decides who they're going to put up at the podium. They do, or the lectern, I guess you should say. I think that they do take some input from media members. I personally don't care, because we just go into the locker room. So if they don't put a guy up at the lectern in the auditorium, I'll just talk to him at his locker. And I think it's better to talk to players at their locker, because it's a lot less stilted. You get a lot more authentic interaction. So that's a situation where it is, they're going to put the main names up there. They're going to put guys that, had either the quarterback or had a big game, or a star defensive player like Nick Bosa. But there is some flexibility to that. Obviously, if somebody that you don't expect has had a multiple touchdown performance, well, you can get them up on the lectern as well. But either way, now that the locker rooms are open, you can usually get pretty much anybody, unless they sneak out before we come down from the press box after the game. This is a good question from Thomas. Will Jimmy continue to launch it downfield? That Ayuk drop, that was a beautiful throw. Traveled over 40 yards in the air, dropped it in a bucket. Outside the numbers, lo and behold, Jimmy Garoppolo can throw outside the numbers. That's one of the worst narratives that there is out there. He's got the arm to throw outside the numbers. I think they will continue, based on my conversation in the locker room with Garoppolo. I know he wants to do it. I think it's going to be more of a 2017 style thing. Now, he's got power now in that building too. They're relying on Jimmy Garoppolo right now, the 49ers are. And, without spoiling too much of what I wrote for The Athletic, a lot of my piece coming out tomorrow early in the morning is going to be about exactly this. So be sure. I will be in Denver. We'll see you there if you're going to Denver. Yes, I am going to Denver. I'm going Denver, Mexico City, all these road games. I didn't go to Chicago because I had that Matt Barrows did Chicago for us, but I did that triathlon, that relay triathlon with my dad. It's an annual tradition there at the beginning of September. And yes, we did win. It was nice. We got the W. I did the swim for us. My dad did the other two legs. So it was a lot of fun up in Shaver Lake. MJ, does anybody know the answer to this? After the second DPI against Ayuk at the end that put the team on the one, there was a delayed celebration with Ayuk and Debo. What did I miss? Well, maybe they were celebrating the pass interference that put the 49ers at the one. I'll have to go back and watch the replay, because I'm not exactly recalling what you're talking about. Well, I think that Ayuk has good chemistry with Trey Lance too. They're roommates in the offseason, but it seemed that Ayuk and Garoppolo rediscovered their chemistry in Chicago. I believe it was week 7 or week 8 last season. That's when Ayuk finally started clicking with the 49ers offense again. I mean, yeah, I think Jimmy Garoppolo is obviously capable. Thank you, Scott, of getting the 49ers over the hump. Again, last year, they were a play away from beating the Rams, and Garoppolo had 2 injuries to his throwing arm, and Trent Williams was playing on a high ankle sprain. One of those 2 things, or one of those 3 things, isn't the case. Or if Jaquiski Tartt just holds on to a pick, the 49ers make it back to the Super Bowl against the team, the Bengals, who they already beat on the road. 2 seasons prior to that, 2019, the defense just starts leaking like a sieve. No holding called against Nick Bosa. So much happened right in that Super Bowl in 2019 down the stretch. Garoppolo also took a helmet-to-helmet hit. Don't forget that. I think that affected him for the rest of the game. One of those things doesn't happen in Kansas City's favor, and the 49ers win. So you can make the argument that the 49ers is currently constructed with Jimmy Garoppolo as their quarterback are 2 plays away from having won 2 Super Bowls in 2019 and 2021. But that's just football. It's a team sport. Now, if Garoppolo were Patrick Mahomes or if he were Justin Herbert, or I don't know, whoever you want to name that's this elite A-plus quarterback, would he have played to establish more margin for error? Sure. But that's not the argument here. The question that Scott has is, does Garoppolo have enough to get the 49ers over the hump? He has had enough to get them over the hump in 19 and 21, but stuff went against the 49ers, as it does in sports. Sometimes it doesn't work out into your favor. So I think that's a really good question. But people always want to blame everything on the quarterback, or they want to credit everything to the quarterback, and it's not the reality of how football works. Just like the Shanahan blame for the injury, the blame or whatever for the injury, I said there's gray area in between. It's a nuanced answer. Same kind of deal in this situation. I mean, so, somebody said that, Garoppolo chokes, except for when he doesn't, except in 2019 when he led the league, I believe, with 5 game-winning drives. So, yeah, everybody fails at the end of the games, and then not everybody succeeds at the end of the games, right? But most starting quarterbacks have a lot of chances. In those many chances, there are going to be times when it doesn't work out, and there are going to be times when it does. Garoppolo actually has a lot of winning drives under his name. If Garoppolo chokes, well, what happened in Green Bay? He didn't choke in Green Bay. He was hurt. He had 2 injuries in the snow at Lambeau Field, and he hit that pass to Kittle. He hit that pass to Deebo Samuel. Deebo Samuel then ran for the setup of the field goal, and the 49ers beat the Packers. I think Aaron Rodgers choked more than Jimmy Garoppolo in that game, right? So Jimmy, you win some, you lose some, just like all these quarterbacks. Tom Brady has lost Super Bowls too. It's just the rate at which you win is what makes players great. That's why Montana and Brady are at the mountaintop. I mean, if somebody's saying Trey Lance is just not a durable quarterback in the NFL, fair enough. So far, he hasn't proven that durability. Garoppolo needs to prove some durability as well. Only full season that Jimmy has played is 2019. Although you got to give him a lot of credit for gutting it out in 2021. But Garoppolo is capable of finishing a full season, and the 49ers are going to need him to do that here in 2022. Jimmy G does have intangibles. My impression of Kinlaw 2 games in, that's a good question. He's moving people. I loved Kinlaw's first couple pass rushing reps of the season in Chicago, couple swim moves against both guards. He's beating right guard and left guard. And against Seattle, I was highly, highly impressed with just the sheer size, pushing people back in the run game. The Seattle Seahawks only had 36 rushing yards. Javon Kinlaw is not doing his job in the wide 9. Seattle has more than 36 rushing yards. So he's so important to this defense because the wide 9 stretches out the defensive linemen. But you kind of earn that pass rushing opportunity by having strong defensive tackles, athletic guys who can play on islands in the middle so you don't get gashed up the middle, allowing your defensive ends to line up wide and roar around the tackles. Kinlaw plays that relatively unheralded role, and he's been doing a good job. He's really strong. He's lighter this year, but he's maintained the strength, and I've been very, very impressed so far with Javon Kinlaw. Talked to him in the locker room actually after the game yesterday. What's really cool is just how happy Javon Kinlaw is. He could tell that knee injury before was weighing on him. No longer. He's a happy guy right now because he's healthy. And, I think he deserves it. I mean, you look at the story. Javon Kinlaw grew up portions of his childhood homeless, living in the car. He has grinded to get to this point. He's overcome a lot. And then even once he became a professional, he had to deal with that ACL injury. And you have to tip your cap because he's looking really, really good right now. This is not a good take. Sorry, Patrick. Pete Carroll didn't really successfully adjust to anything. You realize the 49ers had 45 carries for 189 yards. They just ran it down Seattle's throat. They had over 38 minutes of possession. The 49ers, Jimmy Garoppolo doesn't play the Seahawks. The 49ers offense plays the Seahawks defense. The goal of the 49ers offense is to play a part in a complementary role to control the football for as long as possible to win the football game. That's the goal. The 49ers controlled the ball for 38 minutes and 20 seconds. They ran 70 plays. Seattle only ran 47, and they won the game 27-7. By all accounts, this was a complete offensive performance from the 49ers, and Jimmy Garoppolo played his role in it. I mean, he even threw in the second half. He had that third down where he hit Deebo Samuel late in the game. That was part of the 9-minute drive that salted this game away. He had plenty of yards in the second half. He got the job done in the second half. This is not fantasy football. We're not sitting here looking to see who's going to throw for 350 of garbage yardage. We're going to see who is commanding the offense, executing the offense in an efficient way, and delivering the kind of contributions that lead to wins. And Jimmy, by every single actual metric that matters, did that against the Seattle Seahawks. If the 49ers get 15, 16, 17, however many more of those performances, they will be Super Bowl champions this season, period. So yardage is not the way to count this moving forward. Antonio wants Aaron Rodgers to the 49ers. Mike doesn't want Aaron Rodgers to the 49ers. I know Mike's a Trey Lance guy, I think. Because you know how I know? Because his Trey Lance's picture is in that avatar. Anyway, Mike wants subscribers. So do I. Let's get to 20,000. So hit that sub button right now. Yeah, I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo wins games. And he wins games because he does that kind of stuff. He makes the passes when he needs to. You know, he's been the most efficient third down quarterback since 2017, since joining the 49ers in the whole NFL. Higher than Patrick Mahomes. So he wins at crucial junctures. He bails Shanahan out at crucial junctures. Does he have some limitations to his game athletically? Absolutely. I don't think Jimmy's deep ball is all that great. And obviously, he's not as fast as somebody like Trey Lance or some of these mobile quarterbacks. But does he do some stuff really, really well? Absolutely. I think the big tipping point for the 49ers in regards to Jimmy Garoppolo when they did pick Trey Lance was the injury situation. He hadn't proven durability, which is why it's ironic in a way that Jimmy Garoppolo has now gotten his job back due to an injury of somebody else. Trey Lance, who they drafted to replace him, hasn't been able to stay healthy. It's a lot of injuries in a short amount of time for Trey Lance. So it's just not easy to stay healthy in the NFL. And that might be something that Kyle Shanahan miscalculated in this whole big investment to go up to draft Trey Lance. And, you know, Eric Gomes, big Jimmy G guy, Eric Gomes. Garoppolo does throw into tight windows with a quick release with a abnormally high success rate. That is indeed something that he does really well. All right, Steven asks about the 49ers defense against the Broncos. Why don't we kind of change gears, start talking about this game against Denver? Is the 49ers defense well prepared to handle Russ next week? They have not looked great so far. The Broncos haven't looked great, no. I think so. I think the 49ers handled Russell Wilson when they're healthy defensively, even with the Seahawks, fairly well. So I absolutely think that the 49ers should be ready to go against the Broncos. I know Jerry Jeudy's hurt right now. I know that there are injuries across this Broncos lineup. I don't think they have particularly competent coaching. It's been a rough first couple of weeks for Nathaniel Hackett on that front. This game looks a whole lot more manageable than it did just a couple of weeks ago for the 49ers and their defense. I mean, let's be honest. The rain and a couple of poorly timed penalties ruined a dominant defensive outing for the 49ers against Chicago. And then nothing ruined the dominant defensive outing against Seattle. The 49ers have been either dominant or close to dominant defensively in 2 straight weeks. I see no reason for their success to not continue against the Denver Broncos. Russell Wilson's a really good quarterback, but the 49ers can overwhelm him with a disciplined rush. They can keep stuff in front of them, and they can continue, flexing the power of their roster moving forward. 49ers have never been able to completely handle Russ, but that's the thing. I'm not talking about completely handling him. This is complementary football, right? You don't only win with one phase of the game. You contain Russell Wilson, you play good defense, you flex the talent on that portion of the football, and then your offense under Jimmy Garoppolo with a bunch of star players. George Kittle should be back in this game. Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk. Then your offense does its part, and your special teams does its part. That was what made the Seattle win so promising, is because the 49ers delivered in all three phases of the game. Even special teams, they screwed up the field goal, but I thought they got them up punt. The return game looked good. They didn't screw anything up in the rain as far as the return game went. Play complementary football. It's going to win you a lot of games. This is also true. I don't know if it's the same Russell Wilson as 5 or 7 years ago. Some of the elusiveness is not as that's what Eddie Dominguez just said. The elusiveness is not what it once was. They're not as fast at the running back room, but let's see what Jordan Mason has, because he's going to be bumped up now. I thought Jeff Wilson, I get it. He's not much of a stretch zone runner. He's more of an inside guy, but I thought the burst was as good as we had seen. It was better than anything after the injury against the Seahawks. And Deebo was bouncy and elusive, and still funny to me that people were saying he didn't want to play running back this offseason during all that contract drama. Yeah, get Russell to run left, because then he's got to flip his body, and that's going to be a lot tougher for Russell Wilson. Has my record prediction changed? Did I say 10-7 or 11-6? I forgot. Then Margot said 11-6, right? I said 10-7. I don't know. I don't really care much for these predictions. I don't put that much thought into them. I just give a general feel of where the team is, and it's hard to stand out in the NFL. I'm somewhere between 10-7 and 11-6. Probably going to keep it there. I mean, if the special teams plays well for the 49ers, I might even, go up a game, one more win, 12-5. But let's just, I'm more of a week by week guy. I'm not a big prediction guy. Oh, I said 10-7 on the McAfee show. Cool. See, this is how much I care about it. I don't even remember what I said about the record prediction. Again, my style of reporting is practical. What does the team have to do this week? What's the matchup tactically from a trade contract standpoint? What are they going to do? When you start predicting record, I don't know what the health situation of the 49ers is going to be in 3 or 4 weeks. I don't know, what the health situation of their opponents is going to be even next week, right? You don't know what's going to happen in this game against the Broncos. So the record is kind of this larger thing that everybody wants to hear, but to me, I'm more about the process than the outcome. 16-1 is DM's record prediction. That's funny. This is very enamoring for the 49ers via Jimmy Ward. But let's, Jimmy Ward with Talanoa Hufanga. But let's emphasize, and this is going to be the final question, so thanks, Jason. Let's emphasize that the 49ers have gotten some nice, good play from Tashaun Gibson. All right, guys, thank you. That was a fun Q&A. Make sure you subscribe to The Athletic. Welcome in to our 2022 49ers coverage and Instagram and Twitter. Instagram as well. You can go ahead and follow me there, at Lombardi himself. I just put up a new photo on Instagram. I don't do it very often, but IG and the Twitter, they're both right there. All right, everybody, sub to The Athletic. Hope you enjoyed the show. We talked to Kyle Shanahan, whether it's his fault or not. The answer was complicated. It wasn't really extreme on one side. And I think it's worth a rewatch if you're just joining the live. So make sure you go and rewatch the start of the video. Just a few minutes I talked about that. Hopefully made it nice and concise. All right. It's been a day full of content. Everybody have a good sleep. Big article coming out tomorrow on Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance on The Athletic. So make sure you subscribe there. Be ready for that coming out early in the morning. Thanks, guys. Talk to you soon. Everybody have a great night.